Welcome to Poppy's blog. Today I'll be reading a story I wrote on Thursday, One Spring Day. It was a beautiful spring day on the ranch. I woke up, made a cup of coffee, and went outside to check on the sprinklers and turned on a few water lines. I noticed some sprinkler heads were clogged, so I turned off the line and took off the sprinkler heads and blew on them to try and get the earwigs out or used my pocket knife. I turned the sprinklers back on and headed down the hill. I let Leo, Zach, and Charlie out of their pen for their daily run down the road. When we returned to the ranch, the dogs went into the run except for Charlie. He liked to lay on the porch while I worked in my office. I went over to the chicken coop and counted them and let them out. Last night I was missing Gail and the redhead, and this morning they're no-show. I was a bit worried, but I had to get into the office and work. As I walked up the hill, I turned around and I could see the chickens sprinting across the pasture to the pine trees that lined the west side of the property. My two ducks were in an argument because a mallard male was hiding near the water trough. I came back up the hill and poured myself another cup of coffee and went into the office. I was terribly busy because I was in negotiations on a large parcel to a Southern California development company, and I had to make sure I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. I was on the telephone for a while before I realized I had not turned off the water lines. I walked out of the kitchen back door to the deck and noticed all my sprinklers were just spitting water. There was no pressure. I walked back into the house and turned on the kitchen faucet and found the same issue. I turned off the water lines and sprinklers and ran down the hill to see if my water tank was empty. It was not, but no water was making it up the hill. I came back up the hill and called the well people. I met the guy at the main gate around 1 o'clock. I asked him to do whatever he needed to do to get the water up the hill, and I went back to work. As I walked up the hill, I still did not see Gail, my bantam, or the redhead that were missing. I decided to take my lunch. Halfway through my lunch, there was a knock at the door. It was the well guy. He said he had bad news. I said, okay. As I took a sip of my water, he said, your bladder is blown. I looked at him dumbfounded and said, can you repeat that again? I said, ma'am, your bladder's blown. He then said, follow me and I'll show you. As we walked down the hill, he explained the bladder function. The well pressure tank uses compressed air to push pressurized water out of the tank and up the hill into your home. Pressure tanks have a diaphragm, also called a bladder, that separates a chamber of air from the water. As the tank fills with water, it compresses the air chamber. As we approached the tank, he knocked on the tank and it was full, and it was waterlogged. He said the tank should sound hollow above the bladder. I said, I'm learning something new every day. I asked him if he could take care of it today. He said, yes, ma'am. I need to go back and pick up a tank. I said, great. I let him out of the main gate. Just when I went to close the gate, I saw my redhead coming down the hill with 7 baby chicks walking behind her. Then I noticed Gail, the bantam in the pasture, with 4 baby chicks. My neighbor yelled over and said, oh my, you're a grandmother. I smiled and waved and laughed. The well guy came back and finished the job. I paid him and he was on his way. It was getting dark and I went and opened the chicken coop. All the chickens came in except for Gail. I saw the baby chicks near the tree and looked up and noticed Gail was perched on the tree limb. I told Gail to come down and tend to your children. She did not. I sat there for 15 minutes waiting. Still nothing. I walked over to the chicken coop and grabbed my New Jersey Giant and my other redhead and dropped them near the chicks. Within a few minutes, my mature hen said cluck cluck and opened their wings, and they became the stepmothers of the baby chicks. Meanwhile, Gail, the hen, was still in the tree. I closed the chicken coop, looked over at Gail. She was acting like she didn't see me. I came into the house and called it a night. The following morning, I went down to open my dog kennel, and Gail, the hen, was still in the tree but making weird noises. I decided when I got back from the run with the dogs, I'd catch her with my net and put her in the coop by herself. We had a nice run and returned back to the ranch. I grabbed my ladder and the net. I caught her on my first try. Gail was agitated and fought in it. and as I talked with her, I think she was crying. I sat in the coop with her. I believe she had a condition called postpartum psychosis. I heard some women go crazy, become depressed, anxiety after giving birth. Gail was showing signs of that. I fluffed a nice bed for her in the corner of the coop. I must have sat with her for about an hour. Gail just stared at me and made these weird noises. I had to go back up and open my office. So I left Gail in the coop. That evening I went down to open the coop and found Gail dead. I think her little heart just gave out. I picked her up and buried her in the garden. I thanked her for the babies, and I promised they would grow up healthy and happy. That evening I sat quietly and watched the stars from the deck. Let me leave you with this quote. In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety. Come follow Poppy the Author, a country girl at heart, on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and now TikTok.